What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. There has been a lot of conversation around the £8 million midfielders so far in pre-season. So this video is about them and them only. There's 7 options and I'm going to try and rank them from best to worst and obviously giving you my opinion about why the players are in the position they're in, but also what could change in pre-season, which means that the players move up or down as well. So we're going to talk about all that. If you find it useful, please do give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well. This video has also been sponsored by Fantasy Football Scout. There is a link in the description below if you want to sign up to be a member, and I'll talk about their offerings a little bit later. Okay, so for number 1, I've gone for Saka. Now, one of the reasons the list was so difficult to put together is I found it hard to separate the top 3. Any of the top 3 could probably be in that number 1 position, but I've gone for Saka, and here is why. He's not the most exciting player on the list. He doesn't have the best underlying stats on the list either, but when you are looking at expected goals and expected assists per 90, you ideally need your players on the pitch, right? And Saka is someone that's going to be in the lineup pretty much every single week. Obviously, with a 5 subs rule, you know, European competitions and stuff like that, at some point he might get a rest, but in those opening 6 fixtures, I wouldn't expect that to happen very often, and he often gets to kind of late 70s, if not past 80 minutes as well. So his underlying stats might not be quite as good as some other players on this list, but his minutes and his expectations for starts are brilliant, and I think when you look at those first 4 fixtures in particular that contain Bournemouth away and Fulham at home, that is also a very big plus. I think the rest of the fixtures kind of depends on what you feel those teams will do. Will Leicester improve? Will Man United improve? Will Crystal Palace be able to keep up the kind of defensive solidity that they had last season, especially without players like Gallagher as well? That remains to be seen, but ultimately I see Arsenal as a pretty good attacking team that have made improvements to their side and squad as well, and therefore that is why I've put Saka as number 1, although like I said, 2 and 3 could easily be up here as well. The only kind of downside really is Gabriel Jesus. A lot of people are going for him, and I think you could make an argument that doubling up on those 2 players isn't necessarily ideal just in case Arsenal start slowly. But if we are just comparing him to the other £8 million midfielders, because of the minutes, because his underlying stats are pretty decent, we know he's always going to be playing in that right wing spot, I've got him down as number 1. So as I mentioned earlier, this video has been sponsored by Fantasy Football Scout. If you haven't already checked them out, make sure you do. There is a link in the description below. You can sign up to become a member, make use of all the great tools. You can pay monthly or do it on a yearly basis. And pre-season is a really handy time to get involved so you can check out all the tools ahead of the new season and get used to them as well. So there's a lot of stuff on the sidebar that you can take a look at, all the different tools. In this one, I want to talk about the stats tables. So you can set up different custom tables to show you whatever you want, right? So for mine, for example, I've got attackers, which basically shows every single player in the game, and I can look at all their different stats. I've then got some just for defenders, just for midfielders, depending on what I want to look at. Then when you're in the table that you want to take a look at, you can change the season if you want to. So I've got it set to last season, but you could look at previous seasons as well. I've also got it set to every single match last year, but you can look at last 6 weeks, last 4 weeks. You can look at home matches only, away matches only. It's very customizable. And then depending on what you want to see, like if you wanted to see last season who took the most shots inside the box, you can literally just filter down and it will show you that in order. So you've got Salah, Ronaldo, Kane, Mane, etc. You can do expected goals, non-penalty as well, and then the order might be slightly different. So you can use that as a good way to compare different players. And once you've created your table, it's very easy to modify it as well. So I'm just going to click on modify filters or conditions at the top, and this list here is all the stats that you can check. So if you're an FPL fan or a football fan, you want to compare different players for different stats, you can absolutely do that. So these are all the stats that are contained within the tables for Fantasy Football Scout, which is absolutely crazy. And if you want to change one, so I've got goal attempts, for example, I can just tick that off and I can do goal attempts conceded, goal attempts from set plays, whatever you want, it's in there. So if you haven't already checked out Fantasy Football Scout, handy link in the description below. Make sure you get signed up during pre-season and check out all the awesome tools that they've got. So Luis Diaz comes in at number 2. He's extremely popular. He's currently the most owned £8 million midfielder, and for good reason, right? He integrated himself into that Liverpool team extremely quickly last year. He looked like he'd been playing under Klopp and for Liverpool for a very long time. Always looks threatening as well. Very exciting. And the underlying numbers back that up. 0.42 non-penalty expected goals is extremely good. A bit like Arsenal, Liverpool also have 2 newly promoted sides in their first 4 fixtures. And ultimately, as a whole, whole, those first 6 are quite similar. Now, I originally had Diaz down at like maybe number 3 or number 4 because I do have some concerns over his minutes because obviously they've got him and Jota and Nunez and Firmino and Salah for those kind of front 3 spots. For what it's worth, I think Diaz gets pretty good minutes anyway. I don't necessarily think he's absolutely nailed for every game, but right now Jota seems to be struggling in pre-season with a bit of a hamstring issue. So that if that is still ongoing as the season starts, suddenly the expectation for Diaz's minutes get much, much better. And that is why I put him all the way up to kind of number 2. I know a lot of people see him as the best option, but I just think with Arsenal, you've got kind of Jesus and maybe a defender, right? No one else is really threatening Saka apart from maybe Martinelli. With Liverpool, you can make a very good case that Salah, Trent and Robertson are the 3 best options, and you can get Robertson and Trent Alexander-Arnold for a little bit of less money than you can with Diaz. So that's why I haven't put him at number 1. But if Jota is out at the start of the season, I think Diaz looks great at 8 million, especially if you're happy to go with maybe a Cancelo or a Chelsea defender instead of Robertson. So Mount comes in at number 3, and again, he could have been number 1 on this list. I think out of the 7 players, Mason Mount, Saka and Maddison are probably the only ones where I don't have any concerns over minutes. I think Mount will start most games, maybe not quite as many as Saka, but the difference is so small it wouldn't concern me at all. I just think, especially without Europe and stuff like that, Mount probably starts every one of these first 6 games without, any injury concerns or stuff like that, as long as he's fit, basically. They don't have, Chelsea, any of the newly promoted sides in the opening 6, but Everton, Leeds and Southampton were all really poor for expected goals conceded last year. And look, you could make a case that Leeds have got a load of new signings. Jesse Marsch might make them a bit more defensively solid. Everton have got Tarkowski now, but to be honest with you, that doesn't really concern me. I see Chelsea as a team that are going to score plenty of goals in these opening fixtures. Spurs at home maybe is quite difficult in game week 2, but otherwise the first 5 look pretty good to me. And to be honest, he's just an all-round solid pick. You know he's going to start most games. The fixtures are good. Chelsea will score a few goals. Sterling will probably help them out in that regard as well, so Mount could be providing some assists there as well. And his underlying numbers, again, are really good. 0.31 expected goals per 90 and 0.25 expected assists. And when you do that over a very good amount of game time, that is impressive. You might call it a boring pick, and that would be fair enough, but boring often means points, and points are great. So I think Mason Mount is a brilliant pick at number 3. Okay, so I've got Foden in at number 4. For anyone that watched my videos last year, you'll know I'm a big Foden fan when it comes to FPL. I had him in my team quite a lot last season, and as much as we talk about rotation under Pep Guardiola, Foden started 24 times last year, which is quite a lot, much more than Mahrez, and he kind of was, when fit, often picked under Pep, right? Especially when there was no Europe and stuff like that. So that does kind of bode well. One of my issues is he played quite a bit in that number 9 position last year, and obviously Haaland we're pretty sure he's going to come in and take over most of that game time in that position. So he then has to be moved somewhere else. It could be to the left, where he also played last year, but Grealish is a bit of a worry. He could play on the right, which he didn't do much last season, but he has done before and is more than capable. Maybe Pep will transition into an 8, which he's talked about in the past. Wasn't quite ready for it. Maybe he now thinks he is. There's just a few too many concerns for me to put him any higher on this list. And I don't think, although his underlying stats are extremely good, I don't think that outweighs what the rest of them can bring in terms of minutes and fixtures as well. So Man City's opening fixtures are pretty good. Again, they got Crystal Palace in there, Bournemouth at home, Nottingham Forest at home as well, which is great. And if Foden starts all 6, he will be brilliant, but I just don't think you can trust that he will. So I've got Mahrez in at number 5. Now, the reason that he and Foden are ahead of Kulusevski or Maddison is because I don't think you can make a good case to pick either of those other 2 players ahead of the top 3. And what Mahrez and Foden are potentially capable of with minutes is pretty damn good, right? With Mahrez in particular, you look at his output for last year, 0.66 goals per 90, 0.3 assists per 90. That's nearly a return every 90 minutes that he played. Now, we have to discuss minutes because they are an issue, right? And ultimately, if you don't think Mahrez is going to play, put him in position 6 or 7. If you do think he's going to play quite regularly, you could make a case that he's the best player on this list. He's that good, right? But he only got 15 starts last year. That is less than the 24 that Foden got, which is why I've put Foden slightly ahead. And I'm also not massively convinced that his game time is going to go up a hell of a lot this year. I know that Jesus and Sterling have gone, so there's less competition for that right wing spot. But with Haaland coming in number 9, and we expect him to play there pretty regularly, right? It means anyone that's played there before now has to find a different position. I've just spoken about that with Foden. He could play on the right. Bernardo Silva could also play on the right as well. So even if Mahrez lines up against Liverpool in the Community Shield, I'm not sure that we can definitely say he's then going to start West Ham and start Bournemouth and start Newcastle. And Man City will score a lot of goals, so none of those fixtures are really necessarily that difficult. But I think if Mahrez only starts kind of 1 or 2 of the first 4 or 5 game weeks, he's not going to be good enough to compete with some of the other players on this list. So minutes is really key. If you think I'm wrong, and Mahrez is going to kind of lock down that right wing spot, at least for the opening 4 to 6 fixtures. You don't necessarily need to worry about any longer than that. Then put him in your team because he'll be brilliant. If you've got any doubts or if you're going to react badly to the first time he's benched, don't put him in at all. So I've got Kulusevski in at number 6, and this is starting to feel like a bit of a music chart show on the radio, but there you go. He's ahead of Maddison mostly because of the fixtures. I don't particularly like Leicester's fixtures that much, and Spurs have Southampton at home, Forest away, and Fulham at home in the first 6, and Wolves at home isn't that bad either. We'll come on to minutes expectations in a second. I don't necessarily think that Kulusevski will go at 5.5 points per match again next season, but I do think his potential output is decent enough that he could still be a good pick. The main thing comes down to minutes, and the reason I've got him at number 6 is because I'm not sure how much to back myself. A lot of people are talking about Richarlison at 50 million, the fact that he now has to be a starter because of the price tag. But first of all, Son and Kane are going nowhere. They're going to be in pretty much every single starting 11. And again, you don't necessarily play the same starting 11 every week. But I think in the league, we can all agree that Son and Kane are going to start most games until fixture congestion really ramps up. So unless they're going to change formation, which I don't think they will, Richarlison is either a squad player or he's going to play on the right. And he's barely played on the right over the last few seasons. And Kulusevski was also brilliant last year. Now, you might say, why would they spend £50 million on a squad player? That is kind of what the top 6 are doing right now. They need squad depth for all the different competitions they're playing. They need squad depth in case there's an injury, right? If Son or Kane miss out, Richarlison can play in both those positions. And again, you might question why a player would go from almost a guaranteed starting position to squad player. But maybe being a squad player for Spurs, knowing that you might get a chance, you know, playing in the Champions League and stuff like that, is better than being first 11 at Everton, given how the season went last year. So on one side, I'm thinking Kulusevski does get pretty decent minutes this year because he was so good for Conte last year. But at the same time, I've got so many doubts in my mind, or some slight doubts in my mind about it, that I just don't think I can necessarily put him in, especially ahead of the likes of Saka, Mount and Diaz. So as with a lot of players on this list, it's going to depend on your minutes expectations. I've got too many doubts to put him in. If you think he's a regular star, I think he's a great pick. And Maddison comes in at last place, number 7. Someone had to be there, and unfortunately it is James Maddison. The reality is he's now 8 million. He's competing with some very good players, and he just does not really have the fixtures. One thing he definitely has is like almost guaranteed minutes and guaranteed starts. I don't see him missing out too often for Leicester, especially when they're not in Europe. But I don't think that outweighs the fact they've got to play Brighton away, Chelsea away and Arsenal away in the opening 6, and also got to play Man United. And I just don't think those fixtures necessarily look that good. And again, his potential output, goals and assists, was extremely good last year, right? And if he carries that on again, he will be a great pick at some point this season. His goal threat, his expected goals per 90 minutes, that also went up versus the previous couple of seasons. So there is definitely potential there, but I don't think any of that outweighs the opening fixtures. So he's definitely someone I'll look at later on, but now he's competing with so many other good players at the same price point. It's just more difficult to make a justification for game week 1. There we go, that was my attempt at ranking the £8 million midfielders. Make sure to leave a comment below, which I know you will, to tell me what I've got wrong. I think there'll be a lot of debate about the top 3 in particular. And if you haven't checked out Fantasy Football Scout, make sure you do. Link in the description below. You can get signed up on a monthly or a yearly basis, and it will help you during this FPL season. I have some plans for some other kind of videos based on ranking players. So if you do want to see more of that, make sure to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button if you're new around here. Otherwise, I'll catch you tomorrow for another video.